Here's something rare for me. I don't build very many solid body guitars, but when asked, I am certainly happy to oblige. The person getting this SG style with a one-piece mahogany body and a three-piece mahogany neck, he wants it finished in the I guess standard Gibson SG color. I've seen it mentioned as antiqued red or vintage cherry. He told me to use the cover of this book as my reference. So this is the color I'm going to try to achieve. First thing I'm going to do is fill the grain of the mahogany. I'm using this oil-based pore filler called Pore Opaque. Looks delicious, like chocolate pudding. So the way this grain filler works is first you brush it against the grain and then do a little more with the grain. I'm going to try not to get too much down in the post holes. So the filler is going to do two things for me. First, obviously, it's going to fill the pores in the wood, and that means I will have to do a lot less spraying of lacquer to get a level finish. But the other thing this is going to do is darken the wood, and I want the wood to be darker so that when I spray the cherry red lacquer, it doesn't just burst out like cherry red. I mean, the color I'm going for is much darker than the red that's going to come out of the gun. So by having this dark background, it's going to make the red lacquer look much closer to the antiqued cherry that I want to achieve. Now I'm going to brush with the grain. When I'm brushing, I'm also pushing down to try to get the filler right into the pores. I don't just want this stuff laying on the surface. Okay, there. So now I wait a few minutes for that to get kind of a cloudy haze to it, and then I will scrape off the excess. It's been drying about 5 minutes, and there is a uniform dull look to the whole surface. So now I'm going to scrape off the excess at a 45-degree angle to the grain. Whoa! Don't know my own strength. Okay. Alright, so that gets most of the excess off. And now, the next thing the manufacturer says is to wipe with the grain using a cloth. Yep. Well, it looks pretty dark right now, but I think when the red lacquer goes on, it'll lighten up. Now I'll do the neck, and then let it sit till tomorrow before doing anything else. I want this filler to be very dry, before spraying any kind of lacquer on it. Otherwise it just turns into a dull, cloudy mess. The filler is completely dry, so I removed the original tape on the fretboard and remasked it. I scraped the bindings pretty well, so I taped along the sides, but I expect there will be some leakage of red when I spray that on, and I'll have to scrape the bindings more. So what I've got in this jar is a very concentrated cherry red lacquer. I used about a ½ ounce of tint or stain from Stuart McDonald, ½ an ounce in this ½ pint canister. Then I took a little bit of that, well, about half what you see in here. I poured some of that concentrated stuff into another jar and diluted it 50% with lacquer thinner. And I'm going to use this as my sealer coat on the guitar. I don't have very good luck with vinyl sealers. I know that's kind of like what most people do, but I find I get much better results if I just initially use a very thinned coat of lacquer. So a 50-50 mix of tinted lacquer and lacquer thinner gives me the penetration that I need. And I don't know, the top coats just seem to stick better when I do this way than with vinyl sealer. So I'm going to spray, probably twice with this real thin stuff. I'll cover the whole guitar, then make sure it looks okay, and then I'll spray the more concentrated color on. Well, it's already looking pretty close. I don't know, the lighting probably isn't great, but I like the result so far. But now I'm going to do 1 or 2 coats of the undiluted cherry red lacquer. Then I'll see how it looks. The color looks pretty even, and I know it's probably dark in the camera, but it looks quite close to the cover of the book. That aged cherry color that I was shooting for. So now what I'm going to do is spray a couple of thinned coats of clear lacquer, again using that 50-50 blend of lacquer and lacquer thinner. And this will do 2 things. First, if there's any unevenness in the color, which I'm not seeing, but if there is any unevenness, the thinned lacquer will help blend everything together. And the second thing it'll do is it'll seal the color in, so that when I peel off the tape and start scraping bindings and that sort of thing, that I'll be less likely to scratch the red right off of the mahogany. So I'll get those 2 sprayed and then let the guitar sit for a day or so, and then I'll scrape off the bindings and do nothing but clear coats. Now I'm going to take the tape off and scrape the bindings of all the overspray, which is going to take quite some time. But I have to get all that cleaned up before I start doing clear coating. You can see a lot of red that bled through, and my big concern is to get a constant white line at the bottom of the binding and not scrape into the mahogany neck. That's what's going to be the time-consuming part. I've scraped the bindings and now I'm ready to start clear coating. The first spray that I'm going to do isn't actually completely clear lacquer. I put 1 drop of vintage amber toner in the lacquer and I'm just going to spray one quick time with that particular lacquer. Don't know if it'll do any good or not. I'm hoping it'll just give the guitar a little bit of a softer color, especially the white bindings. Maybe they won't look quite so stark white, but hopefully they'll also, or hopefully it will also bring out the color in the red a little bit better. Well, I don't think the vintage amber lacquer did anything at all. It was probably just a waste of time. So now I'm just going to switch over to clear lacquer and start building up coat until the lacquer looks thick enough that I can level it effectively without breaking through. I finished putting on the clear coats a couple weeks ago, and now I am sanding the finish level, and then I'll buff it and probably do more leveling and more buffing. This is a really difficult guitar to get the finish smooth on because all of these contoured edges, I wind up with very vulnerable spots at each edge of the contour. It's really easy to just lean a little bit extra and then sand right through the color, which is very difficult to fix. And then of course these tight cutaways are hard to sand and even harder to buff shiny, but that's the task at hand. So give this a little up now and see where I am. Well, so far so good. There's a lot more buffing to be done, but I'm happy with how it looks at this point. This was the reference color, and this is what I wound up with for a color. It's obviously it's not exactly the same. I'm never sure when I look at pictures though how true to life they are. I know when I photograph guitars, they don't necessarily look the same in the photo as they do in real life because of like shutter speed and the lighting that gets used. So even though this isn't a perfect match, I feel like it's pretty close, and I think the person getting this guitar is going to be pretty happy with it. So on to more and more buffing. Here is the finished guitar in all of its antique red glory. Pretty happy with the color and with the rest of it too. Plays really nicely, and I think the owner is going to be very happy with it. Show you the back side. This does have a 3-piece neck instead of the conventional 1-piece, and we did that for added strength. Also, I don't know if it shows up, but it has the volute at the back of the peg head. Anyway, just some final little bit of polishing to do, and then it's good to go.